Okay. Good evening, everyone. As you may know, this week, Cole Brower completed the Global Solo Challenge, where she spent 4 months at a non-stop solo sailing race around the world. And she was the first American female to ever complete this challenge. It doesn't look like it was easy from what I've read, but she sure did it. And this is why we're here today, to shed light on women who've succeeded in sailing, overcame barriers, broke stereotypes, evidently, and proving that sailing, as we at Broadreach Spot like to believe, should be accessible to all youth, particularly girls and underrepresented groups. So to explore why and how this should happen, I'm happy to welcome our speakers tonight, who bring in their perspectives from both their professional lives and their personal experiences. Commander Leanne Crowe, military instructor and curriculum developer at the Canadian Forces College and a naval officer in the Canadian Armed Forces. Welcome. Christy Griffin, executive director at Tall Ships Canada. Thank you for being here. Simpson, previous captain of Tall Ship Jeanne, Tugboat Theodore II, and the scientific research vessel Namao. Thank you for joining us. And Marjolyn Hart, Vice-Commodore of Community Services, Community Programs at Ashbridges Bay Yacht Club. Happy to have you with us tonight. Thank you all for joining us. Marguerite, did you want to say anything?
Did I miss Christy Griffin, or did you just fly by this?
I did not miss Christy Griffin.
I did. Sorry.
Allow me to start with Commander Crowe. About 30 years ago, you were the first female Canadian Forces clearance diver. And I'm sure that came with that was a challenge, because being the first female to do anything can't seem to be easy. What stereotypes did you have to prove wrong when you started, and where did you get the inspiration to persevere?
So I think before I talk about the stereotypes, I probably should make it clear what a clearance diver is. Mm-hmm. So I'm in the Navy, if you can tell by my uniform, in the Royal Canadian Navy. And we have divers in the Navy that do various roles underwater. And the clearance diver's main role is to actually dispose of underwater mines and explosives. And so it's called clearance diver because we clear the mines. And we use various different tools and various different diving apparatus to do that. So that's basically in Clearance Diving 101. I can get into more detail if people have questions about that. In terms of stereotypes, in terms of being a Navy diver, I'm not sure if people have seen movies with Navy divers in it, but you have to carry, when you're not underwater, a lot of very heavy equipment, including hard hats, rebreathers, etc. And I think the biggest stereotype is that you have to be like an incredibly large and very, very physically strong person to be a diver, which is true in terms of you do need to have strength. But as soon as you get underwater and you have no gravity, basically, the difference between someone who's incredibly strong and someone who is maybe not so strong is very little. That gap is definitely close. So you do need to maintain good physical fitness, because you are going under pressure and you are not doing something that's normal for the human being to go underwater under pressure. And so you do need to be physically fit. But once you're underwater and you actually have a task to do, it's more about your thinking processes and how you can manage your movement underwater. And it doesn't necessarily mean being super strong.
No, and that couldn't have been easy. I mean, you make it so easy talking about it, but I'm sure that came with challenges, things to learn, ways to grow. So we're going to be talking about that. Allow me to ask Caitlin a question that comes to mind also, because you've been sailing for many years now. Throughout your career, you've worked with many different groups, many youth groups. In your opinion, why would it be important for that a medium like sailing becomes more diverse and inclusive?
Well, actually, I think that sailing is already quite diverse. I mean, it's been around for a very long time. It has origins in every corner of the globe, from like junk rigs to schooners to longboats. There's like an immense diversity in sailing history around the world. What we need to do is reflect that diversity in our crews, which is the real goal, I think. Sailing has taught me anything. It's that there's no one right way to do something. It's always a question of balancing pros and cons and functionality versus difficulty. And the more experience we have, the more knowledge we have going into a problem to come out with the best solution for that situation. And when I say knowledge, I don't necessarily mean like my own experience, but that as well. But the experiences of everyone around you, because they bring a lot to the table. So with everyone on board, they bring unique experiences and knowledge aboard with them. Whether they know it or not, they're always bringing new ideas to the table. What's obvious to one person might be completely inconceivable to another. And when we fill up a ship with a diverse crew from different backgrounds all over, we get access to that knowledge and the stories and the insights that they all bring, and that one person couldn't possibly accumulate in a lifetime. It also teaches us to empathize, I think, and open up our minds to new options and possibilities. And in my experience, it's always interesting and more fun to work with a diverse group of people as well.
Mhm.
Agreed. Especially when we do outreach programs and we answer questions from youth and parents, it's also evident how everybody perceives it differently, their expectations from the programs, their expectations of the challenges they might go through. So Marjolyn, at Ashbridges Bay Yacht Club, you have different programs for youth, and you've worked with both girls and boys, men and women sailors. In what way, from your experience, do girls and women benefit differently when they learn sailing?
I think sailing is such a unique sport because it's a lifelong sport that you can do. You can start as a child and you can revisit it through your life. It's not something that you're physically limited in doing as you get older. And I think with women and with girls, what's unique about them is that it's another fun thing to do, but in a different environment. So being on the water, there's nothing like it. And especially being on the water near a big city where you go down to Ashbridges Bay Yacht Club, which has this oasis. You go through the gates, you go there, and it's like you're in cottage country, but you're 5 minutes from downtown. So there's this shared experience that happens when girls sail. It's not really about being a solo. I find that girls don't want to compete as much. They do like to have competition. That's something to do on the water. But generally, it's this kind of shared experience. The problem we're finding is that girls feel that they don't have the same skill set as the boys. And so girls tend to drop out of sailing after they do the first level. There's 6 levels to sailing to acquire 2 different levels. And after the first level, we found there's a high attrition rate. And so we created a program where we were trying to find a way of building bonds between girls at the girls sailing camp. So we have 1 week, this will be our 4th year, 1 week, the last week of August, that it's just girls or those who identify as girls, led by female high quality Olympic trained and participant Clara Gravely, who is participating in the 2024 Olympics in the lasers at Ilka's, and the top racing coach from Ontario Sailing, Violet Stafford. And then we have also beginner sailors there. So what we wanted to do is create and enhance the bonds that women feel or girls feel when sailing. And then that hopefully will retain them in the program, because Canadian Women in Sport did a study recently where they found girls are dropping out only, and after COVID, only 25% of girls are returning to sport because they feel their skills aren't up to the level that they want, and a lot of self-image stuff. And we're talking between 11 and 14 years of age primarily. So a really critical time to build bonds and create leadership. And so that's kind of the target of what we're trying to do. How do we compensate and push back at that? One of the things from that study is also that as parents want quality training, so they want quality experiences and quality camps, not just so the girls sailing camp is a way of sharing, but it's also a skill development. And sailing, like So what sport can you do, or what kind of vehicle can you operate without a license? You can take a sailboat out, you can learn how to sail it. It's all about self-initiative, self-motivation, it's leadership, it's crisis management. I mean, that's a big piece of being a Marine. It's just, how do you be with others and still be able to decide in order to overcome obstacles, and you persist and you're resilient. And that's all built in to sailing. And on top of that, the number one thing is that we want it to be fun. So that's our biggest thing, is that sailing became, in the last 10 years, all about racing. And at ABYC, we've really pushed hard to how do we diversify the sailing experiences. So different types of boats that are lightweight, so that girls can operate them. When they flip over, they can get them up, that they can operate them as a shared experience. And so it's all becomes about trying to diversify the experience, break it down. We brought in, part of the program was also adventure sailing, and adventure sailing it's co-ed, but it's female led. And it's kids going on paddleboards and kayaks and on dinghies and learning points of sail. But it's fun, and the pressure's off from racing and competition. And then as it progresses, then they can go into the levels. The main goal that I wanted is to create a leadership program where girls and boys see sailing as an instructor level. So they can go through their levels of sailing. After they finish their levels of sailing, they can become an instructor. And when you look at diversity and equity, I mean, we're looking at a summer job to work outside and make $8,000 to $10,000 a summer. And there are so many jobs, so many sailing clubs out there need instructors. So if anyone sees this call in this webinar, I would say go to sail and get a job, especially. And this is a big important thing, is that boys, summer jobs for boys, it's difficult for summer jobs for boys. My son went through, and when he was 16, he got a job as a sailing instructor at Harborfront and did it for 5 years, and sat on a keelboat with 6 kids and sailed around Toronto Island teaching them how to sail. I mean, it's amazing. So it's a type of job and experience that's lifelong, that can give you a great set of skill set and life skills. And yeah, sorry for going on, but I'm pretty passionate about it. So
no, absolutely. I echo what you said. Marguerite, you have a comment?
It occurred to me that we have a very interesting spectrum of perspectives here, because Commander Crowe is in an environment where regulations are strict and very much applied day to day. Marjolyn is sharing with us that, when you're sailing a little dinghy, you don't need any certifications. If you wipe out, you wipe out, and you get up and you get back on the boat. And Caitlin is somewhere in between, because she sailed tall ships, and now she's on Theodore. Are you employed on Theodore right now, Caitlin?
No, actually, nowadays I'm sailing desk. I've moved to the Great Lakes Pilot Authority, so I'm in charge of the certification program there.
Well, there you have it. And then there's Christy Griffin, Executive Director of Tall Ships Canada, where Transport Canada wants a big piece of hierarchy overseeing the tall ships regulations, where sometimes there isn't really a fit for somebody coming with a stick and telling people what to do. So it's a very interesting perspective. Thank you for letting me share it, Farah.
Sure. And I agree with you. And this is exactly why I really am enjoying this panel, because it's also important to tell these youth and every girl or young woman who's considering sailing that they don't have to be in a certain character or skill set, or they don't have to want a certain career. And we're going to be talking about career opportunities in a while. But allow me to circle back to Christy, because when Marjolyn was talking about the young girls' experiences and the challenges that they have, that they face keeping them in the program at ABYC. I'm interested to see your perspective at Tall Ships Canada. What kind of challenges or pushbacks do you face as you try to get more girls and young women into the programs and on the water?
That's I think Marjolyn and I read a lot of the same studies, because that's some of the data that I have as well, is that in tall ships, for example, our target are youth in sort of the 12 to 18 range. And for girls in particular, that's typically when they're dropping out of sport activities and they're dropping out of some extracurriculars and so on. So I think that's from a variety of factors, right? And those are both internal and external motivations. And I also think there's some stereotypes, of course, that we battle. I'll be honest, folks, and say that if you were to look across the Canadian tall ship fleet, which sails with that age group of 12 to 18, and also that operates both in the summers as well as school programs through the shoulder season, you will see that across the fleet, it might be a 50-50 split one year. And then the next year, one tall ship organization says we were 80 girls and 20 guys. And then the next year it flips and it's, 70 guys and 20 girls. And again, that's identification, right? I'll be a little more open with my language. But so I think that that for the girls in particular, I think all of our organizations, regardless of our background, need to be very aware and speaking with these young women and being open about what their expectations are, as well as what we have to offer. And I think that sitting on this call, with all due respect, we're not of that target group ourselves. And so we need to do a really good job engaging with the youth to understand what their motivations are to be there and what the motivations are for them to stay there. And in our tall ship world, and I know that Caitlin can speak to this as well, half the time it's, well, my mom or dad told me I had to go. Or this community organization said this is really fun, so I decided to go. And so it's up to us as organizations to reflect on our own policies and our own welcoming and our own orientation and engagement to ensure that they feel that it's a space where they want to stay. And as to both Marjolyn and Caitlin both alluded to this, it's about role models, right? And it's seeing those women and giving a space for them. So we're just about to put out this video from Tall Ships Canada, and it's put together by a young woman who's studying film. And I am amazed at some of the footage that she got off of this from young women. And there's a French section, and it's two young women, and they're laughing their heads off. And it's because they hauled that mainsail. They lifted that mainsail, just the two of them. And that's that empowering piece that comes out of this. I don't know if I answered your question, but that's sort of where I'm coming from.
I'd love to see that footage, actually.
Yeah, coming.
Great. Let me circle back to Marjolyn, because when we were talking about keeping these young girls and programs, and we keep them engaged, we keep them learning. But if we could go back to the very beginning, I know from my experience at Broadreach, when we sometimes have a challenge reaching out these young girls, especially when we're not talking only about gender equity. When we're talking about inclusion, we're talking about underserved, we're talking about people of color, we're talking about every single youth group that might have thought that they typically sailing wasn't for them. So what steps would you say that you're taking, or that others are taking, to welcome and to reach young girls and tell them that this can be an opportunity for them?
I think the core piece to that is creating, when I first started this, the pushback was, of course, from other members of the club. What about the boys? And that was one perspective. The other piece to that was, well, girls are included. No one says girls can't be part of this. And my response to that was, yeah, of course they're included, but they're not invited. They're not invited and welcomed. They're not said. It's not said, hey, come sail, come be part of our club. We had this past year, I got some funding for diversities, for women, for girls of diverse backgrounds. And it was so interesting because I had an Indigenous mom who said, yeah, we visited ABYC and we went sailing on another member's boat. And in my mind, I never thought that this was a safe space for us. I never thought that we would be welcomed here. And Leap Sailing, which is the organization which I founded with 3 other women, this funding, I said, well, this gives you access. And we have also a fund that I created at the club called the Inclusive Opportunity Fund, which is, members give money and it's tax deductible and it will fund instructor pathway if they go up through their levels. And so she put her daughter in and her friend's daughter, and it's all through word of mouth, right? So it's slowly going out. They're going, oh, ABYC's welcoming, maybe that's a place to go, that kind of thing. We worked with a company, which I had found through a member at the club, Diversity and Beyond, Inc. And that company did on the ground great stuff. They put posters in libraries, and I had moms who reached out who never even thought that sailing was an opportunity for their daughters and said, oh, well, we just immigrated. We're here like a year. Do you think? And I said, yeah, let's do it. And we're trying to understand what are the frictions to stop, say, Black Canadians from coming in, and there's the hair issue. Like, what is it that we can do to facilitate people to bring their daughters through? So it's been a learning experience and trying to figure out. I have to say that, the understanding, okay, putting girls in a boat with boys. So my daughter is leading the adventure sailing program. And so she's got these boats with 4 kids on there, 2 boys and 2 girls. They're 9 and 10 years old. A couple of the girls were the Indigenous girls. The number one thing that we want to think of with girls in sailing is that or diversity as well, that it's a safe environment, that safety is the number one piece. And I'm not, of course, safety on the water, but I'm talking about respect and non-bullying. And she had this thing happen where she didn't know it happened until she got the email from the mom, but there was a lot of sexual bullying going on from the 2 boys to the 2 girls. And the girls basically had the whole thing, and the email got to my daughter, and she's like, my daughter's 20. She's like, oh my God, what am I going to do with this? Like, how do I deal with this? Because here you have people who bring their daughters to be safe in an environment they never thought was welcoming. They get in a boat, and what happens? And it was like, my daughter and I were like, oh my God. So how do we deal with this? So there was a lot of dealing with the parents. The boys' parents we talked to, and we asked them to leave, and the boy did not return that week. And so in the future for this summer, we'll be doing a sensitivity training at the beginning of each session with the group, with boys and girls, 0 tolerance, 0. That's communicated to the parents as well. 1 strike, you're out. And we live in a culture where women, misogyny and sexualization, and it happens. And a 9-year-old girl does not have the facility or knowledge in how to withstand that. A 15-year-old girl could probably push back, but not a 9-year-old. And I did a presentation to the Kingston Sailing Club, and the response of one of the members was, well, girls have to learn how to deal with it. They got to learn how to say it. And I said, at 9? No. You're dealing with pornographic stuff on a boat in a lake? No, that's not, no. And I think that's the reality, is that we have to provide the safest environments as possible, but really be like verbal about it. Go, this is not acceptable. This is what happens. And just assume it's going to happen. And just be upfront with the parents about it. We try and provide a safe environment for the girls, but we can't guarantee. So I think that's the number one thing as far as.
So it's like on the voyage, it's like a little scheme of the general what people experience in life, but they have to learn. We need to have policies instilled. We have to have the sensitivity training that you mentioned. There's a lot of work evidently that needs to be done, obviously.
Yeah.
Marguerite?
Yes, what I would like to contribute at this point is a request to you, Farah, to perhaps engage the other women from youth assisting youth to introduce them to the conversation, so they aren't just listeners but also participants. And I also wanted to counter with Marjolyn's point on 9-year-olds and how they are unequipped to counter that kind of attacks. And I agree that they are not equipped. However, I recall some conversations I had with Christy that it's our responsibility as a society, as parents, guardians, and organizations to equip both boys and girls with the knowledge and the tools that they need to counter that. Because I'm sure that Commander Crowe must have gone through a heap load of stuff like this. I worked in engineering for 23 years before I came to the charitable sector. You know what it was like working in engineering, and I was expected to take minutes of meetings. So I refused to learn how to type. I refused to, I'm a very slow keyboarder because of that, but I wasn't going to take minutes. And so those stereotypes that Commander Crowe mentioned earlier, I'm sure we could hear a lot of stories from her.
A lot of stories of stereotypes, a lot of challenges, successes, and learnings. Because as we keep saying at Broadreach, like it's not only about sailing; it's how we youth grow through sailing and how they learn about different walks of life, different skills, and they gain these skills. They grow in different various rooms. So, Caitlin, you're a first-hand sailor. Based on your experience and having sailed for these many years, what transferable skills have you gained through sailing that you now use them in different walks of life?
That's a great question. It's funny, despite being such an archaic vocation, I guess you'd call it, sailing, there's so many skills that are still transferable to this day and age. Like there's the obvious ones, which are, leadership. It's a great place to build and develop leaders. Teamwork. Tall ships especially are a great magnet for team building exercises for offices or just groups of individuals who want to learn to work together better, because you're forced to in those type of environments. But I feel for myself, what really developed when I was sailing was my confidence, my creativity, and my independence. Well, maybe not independence, but more of like a self-sufficiency. Because when you're out on a ship for longer periods of time, so you don't always have access to the same resources you do on shore. And at first it's a bit scary, like especially if something breaks down. But it seems to always be the case that with what you have aboard and with the collective ideas of those around you, a problem can normally be fixed, if not fixed completely, and fixed enough to get you back to port. But to see what you can do on your own can be really exciting sometimes. Like some problems start as a stopgap, just trying to limp to shore. But once you start troubleshooting with those around you and working together, taking stock of the resources you have on board, it can really turn into like a passion project to really kind of dive into something together. And it can really test and develop your creativity as you try to think of workarounds or solutions with what you have on hand. Sometimes you can even end up with something better than what you started. That's not always the case. In fact, it's maybe not even often the case. But when you put something together yourself, it really gives you a sense of ownership and pride to be able to do that on your own. And those skills, in my opinion, are always useful, whether it's in, as I was describing, a physical or more of a mental capacity. But working on ships, I feel, really gives you the ability to think on your feet, and it really helps you think outside the box when trying to solve potential problems. And the skills I learned aboard really gave me the confidence to try new solutions and make mistakes as well. Sometimes you need to see what doesn't work in order to find something that does. And making mistakes sailing and having to fix them myself, it definitely taught me that.
Thank you. And I see Commander Crowe was nodding as you were answering. I'm guessing you share lots of the same feedback. Commander Crowe, how did sailing help you in your career? Obviously, you were sailing as part of your job, but what other skills did you need to learn to excel, and how did sailing help you do well?
Yeah, I was nodding my head because I was in total agreement with many of the skills and traits that Caitlin spoke of. It's interesting because from the diving, like the physical skills you require, or the mental skills and physical skills you require, just from the diving aspect of my job, things like math and science, and I was never a very good mathematician or scientist, but you go to school and you learn about Boyle's and Charles' law, but if you don't actually see the tangible manifestations of those things, you don't sort of care about it unless you're working in something where you require that. So it's very important to know certain laws of physics when you're basically defying Mother Nature. So that's interesting, and it's a fun way to learn things, because when they're important to you, then you tend to learn them more than if you have to learn them because it's schoolwork. The other thing is actually navigation. It's interesting because, navigation for the most part is also sort of a mathematical solution to get to from point A to point B. And I've used various different tools to do that, literally from sextants to, obviously radar and modern GPS systems, etc. But, the whole idea of actually not having to rely on your phone to get you from point A to point B is quite empowering. I find it humorous today when you talk about the cardinal directions, north, south, east, and west, downtown Toronto, and people are looking at you like they don't know what you're talking about. So I think that's important. I find that the ability to understand that, to get yourself out of potentially, if you're hiking in the woods and you get lost, you can get out of these types of situations. So I think those are important skills. It keeps your mind sharp as well. But the things that I was really thinking when Caitlin was speaking was the problem solving skills and critical thinking, and being, when you understand how things work, you're able to potentially fix them. And I would say in the maritime environment, it's even more critical, because when you're on a ship in the middle of the ocean, or on a boat in the middle of the ocean, and something goes wrong, you only have what's available to you in that boat or on that ship. And so, which includes your brains, but anything that you might need to fix something to get you going on your way again. So understanding how things work will allow you to problem solve better, I believe. And problem solving is a key, critical skill, I think, in life. It also breeds innovation, because you have to innovate because you don't have the tools you need to fix things. So I think those are great things that I use to this day, and whether that's things around the house that you fix, or just literally mental problems that you fix for your organization or for your everyday skills. I think that's mostly the ones that I think of that I was talking when Caitlin was talking. I agree with.
It sounds like these youth will walk away with a lot of maturity, growth, skills that they use, maybe some of them every day in their everyday lives. Commander Crowe, I also read somewhere that when you started your career with the Navy, you started by trying a summer job. You came into program and it was practically a summer job. You would join the reserves for 8 weeks, I believe, in the summer. How important do you think, based on your experience, is that young girls try new experiences in sports?
Super important. So I also was quite a sporty person when I was younger. I still think I can play a good game of soccer and still swim. So I used to be quite an athlete when I was young. But having said that, I think it's a great opportunity to try different things. And whether it's sports or whether it's a new summer job, or, you go to a camp for something, for specific skill set, whether that's space camp or band camp or sailing, Because you need to find something, I think, that you enjoy. And I think Marjolyn mentioned it before, like it's having fun. So when you're young and you're engaging in activities and sport, it should be fun. You should want to go to your next practice or your next camp or your next event. Later on is in your career or in a job, you also want to have fun in terms of you want to enjoy the job. You want to enjoy going to work every day, doing whatever it is you do. So I was very fortunate, very privileged. My parents were very keen on my brother and I, participating in different sports and different activities. And, they would always ask, are you interested in trying this? And we would either say yes or no. And then we would, be enrolled in it. And it was normally at the community level. And so there was a lot of, free, and there still are to this day, free community recreational programs. And if you didn't like it, then you just didn't do that next summer. So I think it's great to try different things because you never know what you're going to like. I joined the Navy, as I said, I don't want to give away my age too much, but it was like 41 years ago. And it was because I found a summer job that I just loved and I wanted to go back. And so I think it's important to try different things. And when you find something you like, continue to do it.
Yeah, it's fascinating how one experience can change your whole course of life. Christy?
Sorry, I know you're directing and asking us questions, Farah, but I can't help it because we've all just met, right? And yet there's such similar things that we can relate to, and you say things and it just makes my brain pop. But when you talk about finding what you love, and that is what makes you go, right? And makes you return. And I think that's, we talked about some of those barriers and that the girls don't feel like they have the ability, or the esteem is not there, or the confidence is not there. And yet we have the ability to present that to them so that they can become interested in and passionate in sailing and the environment that we're offering. I think that just to add on to a couple of things, because you went into math and we did physics, which is so important to get women into these STEM areas, and for youth to learn how to do navigation on the ships, on the tall ships, it's practical. There'll be kids that come and say, I'm terrible at math, I can't do it. It's like, well, actually, let's talk about how we're going to apply this, and they can do it. And one of the things that I think that's such a value, particularly for young women right now, is that it's outside. And you've got those natural endorphins in the sunshine, in the air, from the water, because we're here right now, right? We've got these darn phones right in front of our faces. And these young women are putting down these devices and engaging in that teamwork, in that confidence building work together to move that boat forward, right? And I'm so thrilled to hear about how they start with those little things and then move forward and can look at careers in any one of these organizations moving forward.
Absolutely. Marguerite?
So in the past years, this is our 8th gathering to observe Women's Day, which I believe is year-round, not just some, random date on the calendar that some guy chose. And let's not go there. But what I'm hearing from all of you is similar to what I heard in the previous 7 gatherings. But there are two people on this call, Melissa and is it Rachel from the agency with which we work, Rachel Lee and Melissa Clark. I'm very curious to hear from them what they have to ask or contribute to this conversation, if you don't mind, Farah.
I don't mind. It's really up to them if they want to ask questions or if they want to drop them in the chat. You're welcome to
make comments.
Or make comments, of course. Thank you, Marguerite. Okay. Allow me to shift gears a little bit, because as you said, Marguerite, we say these things, we say our stance, we talk about our experiences, which is all very important. But if we also want to shift a little bit and talk about the action that's needed, to create the change that we all desire, obviously. So Marjolyn, what inspired Ashbridges Bay, for example, to organize the girls sailing camp? You talked about how the power of having girls in groups and how that helped them keep. That's why you created this camp, and to what extent does like female-only events encourage them to stay? Is it like because they share? Is it because they share the same interests or the same? Is it because they validate each other's experiences?
Yeah, I don't know how the experience is on tall ships, for instance, where girls are together. I'd imagine that it's a very similar kind of event where, I mean, I'd like to have Christy speak a little bit to that, how girls build bonds with each other in a shared experience on the boat. I think getting anyone away from technology and focusing on something that's fun and challenging, and then you're learning while not even realizing you're learning. I mean, I don't know how you can't really slam that. So the whole this whole interest started because I was on race committee. I was doing race officiating and not seeing any girls compete. And I have a daughter who was competing and watched how she was intimidated and bullied on the race course. And I saw how officials, how they were demeaning her. And I COVID hit, and I was asked to be on the board of directors at ABYC as rear Commodore. And my first reaction was, well, what is a rear Commodore? And found Leanne, he was like, what? And found out, oh, well, you take care of all the sailing. And then I was like, okay, so what I'm going to do is find the women at this club. Because you know, Caitlin talked a little about this, but there's diversity internationally. But Ashbridges Bay Yacht Club, and I would say most yacht clubs, are primarily men. And the average age is like 70, 65, 70, and they're white. And so putting women's voice in front of everyone and saying this is what we want, it's a change. That's a change. We're there, but no one's speaking up. And so when I became rear Commodore, I started this women's sailing group. We now have 75 members at Ashbridges. I just went to the British Virgin Islands and sailed for a week with 10 women on a catamaran for a week, which was crazy. And I think that it's just all about trying to find an outlet where you have a shared experience of doing something that's not about sitting in a bar and drinking alcohol, and not about, it's about doing something together and being on a boat. I mean, I don't know, Christy, is there in tall ships, do you have like women do tall ships, or is it primarily youth? Because I don't know. I think the women's sailing group would like to go on a tall ship. I think it might be fun.
Oh, Marjolyn, let's connect after this call. We would love to do that, because there are women that do it, and a lot of these organizations do, just as Marguerite pointed out, they do shoulder season programming for adults. And I did it once, and I will never do it again. Caitlin, do not make fun of me. But when you go on a tall ship, in your first couple of days, you have to do your climbing test or whatever it's called, and you've got all your safety gear on. You're all safe. It's just your head, and you've got to climb up, and then you have to make it across, and then you climb down the other side. And I did it.
Oh,
and I'll never do it again. But for some people, they just like to go and sit there, right? And that's where they have their special chats and their special times. And you're talking about the girls, my heavens. And Caitlin could talk to this, and Leanne. If you put a bunch of girls in this tiny space where they have to live together,
yeah,
and eat together and change together and get along together, boy, are you learning to make some new friends fast in that environment. And I think that supportive nature, and the fact that one of the things, Leanne spoke to this about going to a camp or going to a specialty camp, I think, but in the tall ships, you're going to have in your watch that you come to camp and you get divided up, and you're going to have the jock, and you're going to have the theater kid, and you're going to have the kid who comes from poverty, who's there on bursary. You are going to have the kid that took his Rolex off before he came, and every single person on that ship is doing the same job.
Yeah.
And that's beautiful, right?
Yeah, I think the equity that happens, I think that's also, it's so interesting you said that, because that's one of the things that I notice at ABYC. I mean, I'm a visual artist. I do okay, but I'm not a tech CEO billionaire. And that club has them. Like the CEO of Shopify is a member that rolls up in his Lamborghini. And there's a weird thing that happens that it does not matter. Everyone is the same. Everyone is members. They all grumpy. They all complain. And then they also celebrate the junior sailing. And it's this equity that starts to happen when you're on the water. You know, it's yeah, okay, some of them have like 45-foot long yachts. But, you know, the engine breaks and then we're all the same. How do you fix that? Like, you know, how do you sand the bottom of a boat and put the paint on, and it's everyone. And one of the things about the culture of sailing too, which I find so interesting, is that it's all about trying to figure out how to do something for nothing. Like, okay, I don't want to pay for that. How do I figure that on my own? So I think it's really interesting. Like, I think what one of the themes that's coming through here is that there is this longevity of it. And yeah, I'm focused on junior sailing, but it's so important to really pull women through and try and find opportunities for women to do sailing and sailing adventures and be on the water, and so that they keep being engaged. You know, they're part of the scene. Leanne, I was just wanted to ask a question. So, I mean, I'm just trying to have a vision of what you were like 30, 40 years ago when you're starting. Like, we talked a little about female role models. That was one of our main pillars, is having a female role model. If you can't see it, you can't be it. For you, Leanne, how did you? Sorry, Farah. I
love that question.
I'm just trying to put myself in your shoes, Leanne. From what I know you a little bit, it's like, how did you step in that and go, I'm going to do this? Because I can't imagine, were there women that you saw in there, or what made you think that you could do it?
So I have a couple, and it's interesting because I was going to chime in with Christy was talking about living in confined spaces and how you're friends for life with those people now, 30 years later. But I'll get back to that. But it's interesting because I when I qualified as a clearance diving officer, well, I was the first one in Canada and also the first one in the world.
Amazing.
I would preface that with the U.S. Navy has U.S. Navy divers, and so they've had U.S. Navy divers before we had clearance divers, but they divide their divers into different roles, and they didn't used to allow women to do explosive ordnance disposal diving and mine clearance, but they would let them do salvage diving. So I was not the first military female diver in the world from that regard, but the first clearance diver. And like the Royal Navy, for example, in the UK, in Great Britain, announced they would let females be clearance divers 20 years after I graduated. So that shows you how we were a bit leading edge there. But in answer to your question, I had no role models. And I'll tell you a quick story. When I was commanding, I commanded one of the diving units. So I started as a diver and worked my way up and eventually commanded one of the operational diving units. And there was, we would often have tours of people coming through. And there was a tour from our Royal Military College in Kingston that was coming through to see the diving unit. And there was a young cadet. So these are, a young woman who was probably around 22, like probably in second year university. Maybe she was younger than that, in her 20s. And she asked, so I gave an introductory part to their tour, just to say, hi, I'm the CEO and blah, 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 and welcome to the unit. And then they toured the unit. And then they came back, and this young cadet came to me and said, And I couldn't believe it. She said, I didn't know women. So this is someone who's been in the Canadian Armed Forces for a couple of years at the military college. And she said, I didn't know women were allowed to be commanding officers of units.
Yeah.
And I totally changed my attitude, because prior to that, once I qualified, there was a lot of people that wanted to, to be published in articles and various things. And I said no.
Okay.
But I regretted that later on when this young person came to me and said, I didn't know women could do this. And I was thinking, you're telling me you're being educated at, our military college, which is where we're supposed to be, developing our future leaders. And you didn't know that you could actually be one of those future leaders. Anyway, so it was a bit shocking. Anyways, so yeah, I had no role models, but it's absolutely important. The other thing I would say is that I was the only woman on course. So there was 8 of us on course, and I was the only woman. And because I had my own change room, like I always missed the communication. So I'd come running out in my wetsuit and they were all in their sports gear. I didn't get the memo because the instructor went into the one change room and told them that the plan had changed. Later on, 10 years after I qualified, there was 2 women that were on the course and they were together. And I had said, it's great that there's 2 of you because you can help each other out, like help each other put your suits on and off, etc. So that's important too. I don't know, I'm certainly no child psychologist or expert on, but I do think that there's certain times in your life when you're learning new things that perhaps doing it as women only, or, in sort of segregated groups, at least until you're comfortable and have the confidence to move into more perhaps integrated groups. And I'll shut up there. Sorry, I'm babbling a bit.
No. Okay. I just have to say, I think absolutely fascinating how you just kind of had tunnel vision. You have tunnel vision. I want to do this. I'm going to keep doing this. And the world of no is around you. Like, I think as women, we hear so much no. No, you can't do that. No, don't do that. No, you won't be. I mean, I'm a visual artist. The number one thing I've heard since I was 20, no, you can't do this. You can't make a living doing this. This is not possible. And so I don't accept that. And I think that is what we have to put blinders on and just like, don't listen. I want to do this. This is what I want to do. I'm just going to keep doing it. I imagine you had alliances within the military. You had male support, right, in order for you to progress. So that's amazing story. Did you ever feel like the token? Did you ever feel like the token female?
I didn't, because at least I didn't feel that way in the Canadian context, in the Canadian military context, because I was not, paraded around. I did see that in other navies. The Royal Navy, I sailed on ships, and there was we had females on our ships before many countries did. And we didn't make a big deal of it, but I know that certain other countries, when they started once again to allow women to do these things, go to sea on ships and to submarines, etc., they definitely made a point of sort of parading them around. And I know that many of those women did not appreciate that.
Yeah.
So I never felt like that, but I can totally see how it could happen. And as I said, that's why I initially did not want to, be interviewed and go on and on about me being the first of this or the first of that. Because the other aspect is you're trying to fit into a culture, which is a whole other discussion about there's a certain culture that you're trying to fit into, as opposed to just expressing yourself as who you are and being able to do whatever it is that you're joining. So
thank you for sharing. I appreciate it.
Marguerite, you had a comment? You're muted, Marguerite.
Sorry, I picked up on this word allowed because it drives me bonkers. There's this kind of attitude that you have to be allowed, or when people oftentimes men say, before I let you go. Here again is this patriarchal, stuff. Sorry, I almost used the bad word here. That we just shouldn't tolerate it. And every time I hear it, I don't ignore it, because the more you allow it, the longer it will continue. So in addition to creating a life for ourselves, we are constantly challenging the old negative ways in which men treated women. So we need to raise that awareness in young boys and in young girls, and the sooner it starts, the better, because it sticks longer when it starts earlier. But this is no, like, just like colonialism isn't allowed, this isn't allowed either.
Yeah.
And it's a constant battle effort, isn't it? I don't like the word battle, but effort.
Mhm.
So I'm also curious to hear, there's a lot of wisdom in the group and a lot of experience. If we were to share, because this is recorded and will be shared with other participating youth in our programs, what words of wisdom would you want to offer to encourage young girls and young women to take this challenging discipline, be it sailing, boating, working in the Navy, working in maritime sector, in other capacities? How would you encourage them? What's in it
That's
for them and why?
Who wants to start? I think we can treat this as a closing remark, because I do realize that our time is coming to an end. But that's an excellent question, Marguerite. Christy, I
Yeah,
have
that's
another.
a big one.
Yeah.
And yeah, there's no one right answer, because every individual is different and will react to encouragement differently. Some people like really thrive on the support of others, and some people really like the challenge of someone saying you can't do that. That'll just light a fire under them to push them forward. So that's part of the challenge. There's no one answer, but the more options we put out there, the more information I think is possibly the best way to kind of get the word out there. Like, standing on the shoulders of giants, women have done this before. You can do it too, and you can trailblaze your own way in a way that suits you best.
Caitlin, perhaps you could give the youth who listen to this podcast a glimpse of the career opportunities that might be ahead of them should they choose to learn sailing at a young age.
Oh, for the youth, sup fam, this career is lit, yo. Sorry. But yeah, like it's a lot of people don't realize how diverse this career is. Like, you think like boats, and the first thing you think of is like captains, and maybe you'll think about deck officers, and then if you know more about boats, you might think about the engineers that operate it, because that's a very transferable skill if you get into marine engineering. But those are just jobs on the boats itself, and there's like ship's cook. That's the most important job on the boat, and ship's doctors. But there's all kinds of careers also that are connected to it, which actually don't even involve you having to be on a boat. I've been a captain in the past, but currently I'm working at the Pilot Authority, where I'm in charge of the certification program. So for the pilots that operate the vessels in the Great Lakes, that's kind of my domain. But there's also like the ports that the boats visit. People have to design those. People have to work those. There's locks to get things up and down. People have to work those as well. Marine architects, research and development, sustainability is a big thing. AI is trying to operate boats. I mean, like, find something that you're passionate about, and guaranteed it connects to this industry somehow. I'm sure you guys also have lots of ideas.
That's great. Marjolyn, what would you want to say to any young person, particularly young girls who might be considering trying sailing for the first time this summer, but are hesitant maybe?
Yeah, I think you have to go and find a junior sailing and get out on a boat and find a program that just don't listen to people and just go out and learn how to sail on a little boat. I don't know. I mean, there's so many different, the process of learning to sail is just one piece of it, but falling in love with that core piece is what can feed you into other things. I have 2 kids that have done it, and they're still trying to find, they're in their 20s trying to find where they can fit it into their lives. So I think the first thing to do is to really learn and love it. I just want to connect in with Caitlin. Okay, so I had mentioned I was in the British Virgin Islands, and we had this captain on our boat. So we had this 52-foot catamaran, and this captain who was 37, and he was a commercial diver who spent many years salvaging boats in the BVIs and the islands that, of course, hurricanes hit and they wreck. And so then you have to salvage the boats. But there's so many jobs in the Caribbean for cooks and getting your accreditation of captain, and it's a big business. It's a booming business because you've got Croatia, which is all these, it's just these fleets of travel and people wanting to get on a boat, but they don't want to manage a 50-foot boat. So there's all these pieces. It's actually pretty astounding.
Thank you, Marjolyn. Caitlin?
Yeah, one thing you mentioned, just the term accreditation, that's a hard one.
Yes.
Really set me off because that's another thing that's I think really important to this industry is that it's an international industry. So when you get an education in it and you start getting accreditation, when you start getting credentials,
Yeah.
when you start getting credentials, those are generally internationally recognized. So that is something you could literally take anywhere around the globe and take a career with you. I mean, specific countries hiring of individuals, you know, their internal labor laws might be different, but the skills you have are acknowledged internationally. And I think that's a really nice thing to have in such a diverse career as well.
I mean, my kids are looking at teaching junior sailing in the BVIs. Like that's part of, it's totally transferable. It's true what Margarita says, jobs mobility. You get a skill set, you get your keelboat levels or your junior sailing levels, and you can go anywhere. You can go through Europe and the Mediterranean, and you can do it. And I know that, and you're not in front of a screen, remote working, but you are still travel. It's amazing. Yeah.
Yes, Marguerite. And there's no snow down there.
Yeah.
Christy, any words of wisdom, any advice that you'd like to give youth?
It's hard to say. I shouldn't start a sentence with don't, but don't be afraid.
Yeah.
There are so many people that feel the same way that you do, that you don't know anybody, or that you might not be able to do it, or what are you going to do without your friends from home? In our case, on tall ships, when you go away for extended days, right? And I just think that if I could look back on my life, is the simple fact that to grow and to open your mind to new experiences is something that it becomes a transferable skill in itself. And particularly in high schools right now, guidance services are not what they used to be, or student services are not what they used to be. And to put yourself out there into the sailing space, or into the cadet space, or into the space that's giving you an opportunity on the water is really something that will, I think, it kind of blows your mind. Not everybody loves it, I'll be honest. There's lots of people that don't like to work. And there's lots of people that find out what they do like to do by doing these kinds of things.
Yeah, you're right. And even if they don't like it, even if they figure out that sailing isn't for them, they learn something about themselves
Right.
along the way.
Mm-hmm.
Marguerite, you're muted.
I try to be concise, but this is very important to me as a person, and as a professional. I see sailing and being on ships of any size and any persuasion, if I can use that word, to be a microcosm of worldly problems. I said that before, and I keep repeating it, but I also see it as a place, or a space, as Christy called it, where there are fewer negative influences that are imposed on young people by the media, by the general public, and expectations. I know that when I sailed, but whether it was with adults or with younger people, I was seen for who I am, not for what I look like or whether I have expensive shoes or sneakers or bags. It's what I could do. It's how I contributed, whether my empathy was sincere at times when there was a call for empathy. And that would be my encouragement for younger women and girls, that your identity will be less attached to external forces and you can shape it for yourself and by yourself without that negative pressure.
Well said. Thank you. Commander Crowe?
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm just trying to think of, how to encourage folks. It's very easy to say, don't be afraid, but it can be daunting as a young person to try and, reach outside of what they're comfortable with. It can be a challenge. I would say, take a friend or go along with that friend's crazy idea, as long as it's legal and safe. I have to say that actually I joined the Naval Reserve because a friend thought it would be a fun thing to try for a summer job, and I crazily went along with her. She never stayed in, but I did. But so there's comfort in numbers to a certain degree. So if one of your friends has some crazy idea of something to do, I would try it, see what happens. Or if you have an idea, grab someone that like-minded perhaps, or not like-minded, to bring along for the experience. I'm very optimistic by nature. I think opportunity breeds opportunity. So you should try things. If you don't like it, try something else. You never know what other doors will open. And then I think the final thing I'd say, just in the maritime environment in general, like I'm not going to sit here and tell you should join the Navy and sail the world because I'm not a recruiter. But there's lots of jobs in the maritime environment or in the marine environment that could be of interest to you. And whether that's sailing on ships, whether that is operating, drones and remote operating vehicles underwater on offshore infrastructure, or doing research, underwater research and operating different types of robotic vehicles, etc. Those are things that probably a lot of people don't realize that are done at sea or on the sea or under the sea. And the commercial diving side, many of our colleges locally have programs in commercial diving and various other technological occupations that could be pursued either under the water, on the water, or ashore. So I think that's all I have.
And there's no way for them to find out unless they try. So thank you so much. Unfortunately, our time has come to an end. But before we bring this conversation, I'd like to thank you once again for your time, for your thoughts. Thank you for joining us, Commander Leanne Crowe, Christy Griffin, Caitlin Simpson, and Marjolyn van der Hart. And from all of us at Broadreach, happy International Women's Day. As Marguerite says, tomorrow and every day. Have a wonderful rest of your afternoons, of your evenings.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.